Hello and welcome to SCARE and to our virtual space. I am Taylor. I'm the Youth Programs Coordinator here at SCARE, and welcome to Momentum 1.3. This is going to be the third part in our series. If you haven't already, I highly recommend going back and watching the first two parts of the series. This is our career training series, so there's so much great information in every one of these videos. But welcome. As I mentioned today, it is Momentum 1.3. This is the first time we're really kicking off the Momentum series, and today is just part 3 of that. Today we're going to be touching on the topic of healthy communication and what that looks like, especially in the workplace, but a lot of these things also apply to us in our daily life as well. As I mentioned, this is part 3 in a 4-part series. So in December of 2021, we kicked off the series with visualizing your future, setting boundaries, and goal setting. Then the second part we released in March of 2022, and that dealt with career exploration. Now today we're touching on healthy communication, and what better way to kick off summer than with healthy communication. And then the last part in this series is going to be on meeting the employers. So hearing what employers have to say about hiring, about employees, and just getting their viewpoint. And that should be released around September of 2022. And this is also just a quick reminder that after each one of these trainings, you will be sent an interest survey and evaluation. Please fill it out. We want to know how we're doing, and we want to know what topics you guys are interested in hearing from us. So your feedback really helps us and helps us shape these trainings. So we want to do these for you. So please fill out the surveys. Before we get started, I wanted to start off by kind of reviewing the topic of momentum and why we chose this as our theme for the series. So momentum is movement. Momentum is energy. When movement and energy meet, they become your vision. As you visualize your future, your visions become your first steps. First steps become goals that you create, that you can realistically achieve because you set your pace. You are the momentum for your focus, your passion, your goals for your family. As you create your momentum, you naturally begin to take steps needed to visualize your goals as actions and positive energy for your future. Be kind to yourself. So we chose this topic of momentum and kind of like how it relates to goals. So there's so many different ways to think about momentum. Something kind of like kickstarts the movement, and then once that happens, you build up a pace and speed, and then soon enough you become unstoppable. And that's really what we're aiming for here. It's just building up upon like your current goals and what you want to do and building up on it. So I really like that in the first training in the series, we heard from Atle, and he gave a wonderful image of a snowball as being an example of momentum. So picture this. There's a small snowball sitting on top of a mountain. With the slightest push, it starts to roll. Now it starts off, let's say, the size of a baseball. So as it rolls, it starts to gather more snow, and it gets bigger and bigger. And soon enough, it starts to gain speed. It'll start to roll faster and easier. So when we started off in the beginning with this small baseball-sized snowball, there might have been a small rock in the way, and that could have easily stopped it, right? So just if we're talking about this goals, we start off small with these small bite-sized goals, and an obstacle might seem huge at that point, and it might feel like it's going to stop you from even reaching your goal. But now, once you start to reach these small goals, it becomes bigger and bigger. Your goals become bigger, you're reaching more of them. And after a while, you learn how to get past the obstacles. But just like a snowball, if it starts to get bigger and faster, gaining all sorts of speed, there's going to be almost nothing that can slow it down, right? So that pebble that might have stopped the small snowball is nothing once it becomes this large ball. And like I said, like if we think about that, like our goals, we'll learn to work past all sorts of obstacles, and maybe something that would have stopped us before in the past. We learn to work past it and still be able to reach our goals now. So I also wanted to review a little bit on the first two parts of our career training series. So the first training dealt with visualizing your future. So we talked about things like finding your support. So things like the organizations around you, getting help through places like Tribal TANF and SCARE, finding the people to help you reach your goals, create your goals, and just really be your support. And it can be family and friends. It can be people at work. It can be, there's so many different things and ways to find support. We also talked about motivation. So finding what it is that motivates you. Maybe it's your own personal drive to reach these goals and do better. Maybe it's your kids. They're your motivation for learning new things, for getting new skills, for reaching your goals. And then also we talked about goal setting. So instead of having one giant goal that can be really intimidating, breaking it up into these small bite-sized pieces. So instead of saying, oh, my goal is to get a new job, breaking it up into, okay, well, my first goal is to create a resume. And that is something that's much more doable. And you can kind of cross it off your list as you go along. And then each step is going to have a different goal to, in the end, reach your overall goal. We also touched on returning to the workforce. So what that means for you and how to prepare for returning to the workforce, how to prepare just resume-wise, and even just like an attitude mentally in preparing for your family to get ready for you to go to the workforce. Right? And then lastly, just taking the first step to reach your goals. And you even being part of this training series at all, that is definitely a great step into building your knowledge and reaching your goals overall. And so the second training that we had dealt more so with career exploration. So in that one, we talked about narrowing down your career pathways. So focusing in on your skills, on your passions, what you want out of a job and what's realistic for you, and having that help shape our future steps and goals. And there we also went over finding your soft skills. So we have our hard skills, which are things like certificates or knowing how to work Microsoft. And then there's soft skills like communicating or working well with others, and just finding out what types of skills you have and what opportunities that can lead you to. We also touched on digital footprints. So when you're online, your presence almost leaves these footprints, and that can really affect the way that people see you also, and just being aware of the footprints you leave behind as well. We also touch on financial aid for students. So whether it's yourself or your family going through the schooling process, just knowing what support's available financially and kind of the options you have available for that. And lastly, we talked a little bit about networking and basically how your relationships with the people around you can actually help you career-wise. So it can open up new pathways. You might hear about a job that you never would have known of before. Someone can put in a recommendation for you, and just the way that having these relationships can build your own career pathways and goals. So today we are going to be talking about communication. So just first, we wanted to talk about the importance of that, right? Because the way we communicate with everyone around us, it determines how those relationships go. And so the way we communicate can affect the way people see us and the way that the world around us actually interacts with us. You know, if we learn how to communicate in a way that comes off as kind or positive, or, you know, there's a million different ways to it, then the world's going to interact with us in that way as well, where it's just the way that, like, communicating in all sorts of different ways just really affects everything. And I think it's also important to note that communication, we're focusing on communication, especially in the workplace, but honestly, it's something that we use in our daily life with our family, with our friends, with, you know, strangers a lot of the times. And so it really does shape the world around us. And so knowing how to communicate in a healthy way can do a lot of things, right? It can strengthen your relationships. When you're talking to people and they know exactly what's going on, and you're able to kind of express what you're trying to say in a healthy way, it can make your relationship with someone so much stronger, right? And it can help us to set boundaries. So we'll learn how to express when we can't do something or when something's not good for us, and kind of create our own, because that affects our health in a lot of ways too, and our mental health too. So setting these boundaries through communication and the best ways to do that. And then it also can help you express your needs. So it helps you in reaching out to people if there are things that you need, and expressing like your own situation. So people are not going to know what's going on, what's going in through your mind unless you communicate it. And I think that's important too, is we sometimes expect people to pick things up or have these expectations of people, but they're not going to know what's going on if we don't communicate things to them. So it's also just getting in the mindset of like being very intentional about expressing things and communicating so people know what's going on in your own mind. Also, I want to note that communication takes so much practice. It can be an extremely difficult thing to do, especially when we grow up in a way that maybe communicating isn't the healthiest. There are people around us that we pick up the way that they communicate, and that's not always it's not always helpful and always healthy in the way that we've been brought up or in the situations we've been put in. So learning how to communicate is something that's going to take practice. And then also, everyone has different personalities. So naturally, the way we communicate is going to be different. And like for me, I'm a fairly gentle person. So if I have to deal with something that is a difficult topic, I've had to practice and learn how to communicate that in a way that feels more comfortable for me. Otherwise, I can put it off, and that's not a good thing either. So just knowing that your own personality can change the way you communicate, and just finding a way that works for you. And then you can learn to say important things in a way that's more comfortable. It makes it easier to do. So then these important topics maybe aren't being pushed off, that you're able to address things when you need to. And then lastly, practicing communicating in a healthy way, in a professional way, in challenging situations. So don't always like to think about it, right? But there are going to be these times where there's these obstacles or people that we're around, and it's just going to seem a little bit harder to communicate. So again, it takes practice. And so just knowing some tools and techniques for how we can communicate in a healthy way, in a professional way, both in the workplace and at home, right? It'll help us get through these situations and effectively kind of get past it. So you'll be hearing from my colleagues today about an array of other topics dealing with healthy communication. That might be things like verbal communication, so how we come off when we're actually talking to people, in written communication, so just the way that it changes when we're texting, typing, emailing, and how that differs from when we are talking in person, right? We're not seeing the same facial expressions or the same emotions sometimes in written communication. So just learning ways to kind of do that without coming off, in an unhealthy manner. And then just learning healthy ways to communicate, right? So just knowing how we can say things without it being kind of not what needs to be said, right? And we know that things like emotion can really affect the way you communicate. And so just learning the healthy ways to go through that. Also talking about conflict resolution. So when we do encounter those situations that are not the easiest, when we're dealing with something difficult at hand, how we can address it and work past it. Talking about the importance of communication in general. Like I said before, it shapes the world around us. So the way we communicate is everything. That's how we make our friends. It's how we get our jobs. It's how we build relationships with people at our workplace, right? It changes and shapes the world around us. And now especially, there's so many different ways to communicate. We're in a time where we might be communicating on the phone, calling, texting, on Zoom. So having these video meetings, of course, in person, and then written. So, emails, letters, anything like that. There's so many different ways to communicate now. that it's important to know the differences in each one and how, like, the best ways to communicate for each type. And also just being aware of social media presence. So the way that you're communicating yourself and kind of like your image through social media, and how that can also affect the way that people interact with you. And then, of course, communication in the workplace, which is the larger scale thing. All of this has to do with communication in the workplace as well, but just the best ways to communicate professionally, but also like realistically with people around you, and being able to address boundaries, making sure that people know when you're at your limit, when there are things that you can and can't do, or maybe that there's things that you don't like that they're doing that are affecting you a little bit more. And then lastly, communication to help deal with like navigating relationships with difficult people. So there are always going to be people that maybe it's a little bit more difficult, especially it might be at work, it might be out in public, it might be customers, and just understanding how to communicate in those situations when people might not always be open to hearing communication. And so there's so much to it and so much to learn today. So I hope you enjoy our part 3 in our Momentum series, all about healthy communication. You're going to be hearing from my wonderful colleagues, and enjoy. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Caitlin and I'm an intern at SCARE, if I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you yet. And today we're going to be discussing conflict resolution, specifically in the workplace. So I'm going to walk you through the what, why, when, and how of conflict resolution and what that looks like. Just to say beforehand, I did adapt this from information based off of the University of Kansas. So let's start with the what. What is conflict resolution? When is it used? What's the point of it, right? So this is really helpful to use in arguments, disagreements, and differences. So in the workplace, this could be around all sorts of things. This could be about scheduling. Coworkers often have different personalities, and there can be a lot of challenging views brought into the workplace, especially with the work environment we're in now. People may be bringing up politics, things of that sort. And knowing how to manage those differences can be really helpful in the workplace, especially for maintaining employment. So the other thing is, you're going to have to use a lot of communication for this, right? And many of us just aren't taught healthy communication. So learning some skills to manage these things in the workplace can make it a lot easier to have a more peaceful shift, have a peaceful work environment, feel safe and healthy at work, and also maintain your employment, which ultimately is the goal. So the goal of the resolution really is to provide a solution for all parties to improve the relationship and to prevent future conflicts. So obviously nobody likes fights, nobody likes arguments. You don't want to have all these disagreements with your boss or coworker. So we want to prevent them. And what does that look like? How can we do that? And making it so that it's not such an issue that keeps popping up, because typically there are repetitive issues in the workplace that just aren't being addressed in a healthy manner or a way that's suitable. And we really want to make sure that all parties involved can find something that works for them. All right. With that being said, let's look at what's the point of this? Why bother resolving it? A lot of us like to avoid conflict because it can be really tricky to sit down with your boss and have these discussions, or with a coworker. You might feel like your job might be threatened. You might feel like you're just too angry or too upset about something, or you just can't manage your emotions. Or it just might not have come to you as an option, thinking that, hey, I should probably address this and maybe sit down with someone at my workplace to figure this out. So the idea here is that, it makes sense that you might feel helpless. And in a lot of work situations, someone might be, but if you don't ask, the answer is always no, right? So taking the initiative and effort to solve something is a lot more helpful in this situation, looking at ways, okay, maybe this isn't just a helpless situation. Maybe there are ways that we can work on this and make this better for both parties. And learning to address conflict in a healthy way is going to allow you to have that peaceful work environment and also improve your coworker relationships. You don't have to be best friends with your coworkers. I think that's a really high expectation we see a lot based off TV, movies, whatever it may be. You don't need to be best friends. You don't need to be family, but you do need to be able to get through the workday and not have issues that affect your work, right? And affect you outside of work. You don't need more stress than what's already probably in your life. So learning to just have a calm environment is really helpful. And then the other great thing about this is that you can practice interpersonal skills inside the workplace that are going to apply outside. So resolving conflicts and learning to do this and practice this allows you to set boundaries, teach you how to address things. It can be really uncomfortable to say, hey, I have a problem with how this was done, or this really affected me, or this is something that, advocating for yourself. Maybe you agreed to a certain schedule and your boss did not give you that schedule and they're going outside of your availability. Looking at that and advocating for yourself and getting your needs met is something that's going to apply everywhere in your life: friendships, romantic relationships, with your family, etc. So something else that I think is really important to consider is when and who to resolve the conflict with. So you're going to want to find a place that's private to discuss with the people involved. So this may be the coworker that you're having an issue with, it may be with your boss. This could also potentially be a higher up manager or boss, or even an HR person in your company if that is a department that is there. And something to figure out here is who to go to. So if there's something discriminatory or violating, or you feel like your safety is threatened, always go to a manager or HR to discuss these things. This is not something that you need to resolve directly with someone if you're feeling unsafe. But if it is just an interpersonal conflict, it's okay to try to resolve that with the person, or go to your boss and possibly have them even mediate conflict resolution there. The other thing is, you don't want to resolve a conflict when you're still really angry or upset about it. So if you're feeling like you're just all over the place and your emotions are really high, and you can feel this in your body. So if you feel really hot, if you feel tense, if you feel your heart racing, that's not a good time to sit and resolve this. You're not going to get anywhere. You're just going to be really upset and triggered. So that's not the time to address the conflict, and another time would be better. So really wait till you're calm, maybe find a way to calm yourself first before you do attempt to address it, and work from there to resolve the conflict. And then with that being said, the most important part, how do we resolve it, right? Many of us know, obviously, you want the conflict resolved, but what do you do? How do you get there? Especially with potentially maybe you did try to resolve it already and it's just not working. So the first thing is to understand the conflict. What is the issue? A lot of times this is that a need is not being met or a boundary is being disrespected. So did someone cross a line with you that you didn't like? Had you communicated that boundary to them in the past, or is there another way to communicate that to them? And how do you want to uphold that? So that may be saying to your boss, when I interviewed, I said I was available 8 to 3 Monday through Friday. You're scheduling me beyond that. I think you need to respect what we agreed upon. If you look at, my employment paperwork, here's what was there and here's what we agreed upon. And that's really advocating for yourself and looking at those different things. The second part is to communicate. Take turns talking and listening, and make sure not to interrupt when the other person is talking. It's going to be really difficult if you're triggered, if you're really angry about the situation or upset. So really take a minute when they're talking, slow yourself down, and you're going to feel that urge to jump in, to maybe defend yourself, maybe attack the other person because they maybe have a different point of view than you. But give it a second. You cannot reach a resolution if you feel like you're just flooding with emotions. So make sure to give yourself the time and space to get to be calm before getting there. And it's okay if maybe you do get flooded in the conversation, say, hey, I need to take a 5-minute break to cool down before I come back to this. And that's a really healthy skill to both use in the workplace conflicts or any conflicts in your life. It's okay to step away for a minute and then come back. And then the third part is to start brainstorming possible solutions. You can start doing this before addressing the conflict with the person or with the person in the conflict to find a way that something works for both of you. Emphasize places that you both agree on. This will help the conversation run more smoothly. So maybe you both agree that, you're going to work X amount of hours a week, but you're not agreeing about when that is. And then work together to find a way where you can both be satisfied. You both might need to compromise, and you both might need to not get exactly what you want. And that's okay. That is conflict resolution at its core. Looking at the compromises and how to make everybody happy to the best of their ability. And then fourth, choose the best solution that works for both of you. So we want you both the most satisfied you can be, and knowing where your limits are. Maybe you literally cannot work past 3 p.m. because you need to pick your kid up from school. Maybe that's a hard boundary. It's a rigid boundary for you. And that's okay to state that to your boss and let them know about that. So make sure you know what's flexible for you and what's not flexible for you in these situations. So you know where you can compromise, but knowing that compromise is something important in conflict resolution. And then the other option is to have a mediator present. So having a mediator present can help neutralize the conversation and make it a little bit calmer for everybody involved, because there's someone sitting right there to kind of keep things at bay. So if you have a manager or an HR person or even another coworker to help regulate things that could agree to be a neutral party and be completely objective, that's a possible helpful option to explore. The other thing is to explore alternates. If you're still unhappy with the solution reached, consider all possible routes while respecting one another's boundaries. The most important part of this is that you do respect what everybody needs and wants and what those boundaries are, while still trying to find a solution that does meet in the middle. And then the last part is utilize coping skills. So what I say when I mean that is to maintain that if you need to step away, go ahead, set that boundary, and then use something to calm down. So are you going to play a guided meditation, call a friend? Are you going to listen to music in your car for 5 minutes? Are you going to decide to take some time before you come back to this? Whatever it may be, and really just consider regulating yourself first and foremost so that you aren't going into the conversation really flooded and heightened. All right, well, that's all I have on conflict resolution, and I hope that you're able to implement this a little bit into your workplace, and I look forward to seeing you in future trainings.
Hello, everyone. My name is Heidi Beckenbach McGann, and I'm the counseling director here at SCARE. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit about some healthy communication techniques, specifically around active listening skills and using I statements. So I'm going to have us start off with talking specifically about 7 key active listening skills. And when we talk about communication, I think a lot of the times we think about how we are verbally presenting ourselves, but a lot of it really goes into what we're doing in order to be engaged and in order to really listen to what's going on in the conversations that we're having. The cool thing about any sort of active listening skills or communication skills is that they're transferable, right? You can utilize them in all different areas and different relationships that you're having within your life, not only in the workplace, but also with your family, with your kids, neighbors, community. So it can just be really helpful in order to have connections around and understanding around listening skills, as well as how we're presenting ourselves verbally. So we're going to go over these 7 key active listening skills. The first one is be attentive. The second is asking open-ended questions. We're going to talk about probing questions, clarification, which I think is wonderful, just making sure that we're clarifying what's going on, paraphrasing, how we can be attuned to and reflect the feelings of the person that we're communicating with, and then finally summarizing. So active listening skills, when used together, they effectively communicate to the other person that you want to listen to them and to understand how they see the issue that you're working through. And they're just interrelated skills that when melded together can really be helpful in allowing the person that you are communicating with know that you're really invested in the conversation and invested in hearing what they have to say. So we are going to go over, first off, what being attentive is. And if you ever think about the people in your life who you're like, oh, they're such a good listener, I want you to kind of think about what they do that works really, really well. And a lot of this has to do with how present we are in the conversation. So if we're distracted, if we're looking off, if we're on our phone, we're not going to really be felt that we're fully listened to and fully heard. And I think that's one of the most triggering things for people, is not really feeling heard and not feeling validated. And this goes into a lot of things. I think this happens with our kids a lot. I think this happens with us. So it's really important for us to try and be mindful about how we can be fully present, how we can be fully engaged in what's happening in our communication with others. And so that requires us removing distractions. I don't know if you've ever tried to have a conversation with somebody while they're watching TV or holding their phone. Oftentimes we don't feel that we're really being listened to. So it's important for us, if that's not how we feel fully engaged, that we make sure that we're removing distractions in order to really stay present. Also, making eye contact and focusing on the other person while listening. There will be a lot of nonverbal cues for this just as much as verbal ones. So how are we leaning in? How are we nodding along with the conversation? Little things like if we're standing there with our arms crossed and we're looking off, that gives a signal that we're not open and we're not engaged. So when you are having conversations with people, just kind of take some note on how your eye contact is, how your nonverbals are, if you're distracted, and making sure that you're taking the time to really focus in on being present and in the moment. Okay, next we'll move on to asking open-ended questions. So you may have heard about this before, open-ended versus closed-ended questions. And open-ended questions invite people into the discussion. They require individualized responses. So what we don't want to do, closed-ended questions are the questions that can just be responded to with a yes or no response. And oftentimes, if you're asking too many closed-ended questions, it doesn't enhance movement within a conversation. It kind of just adds for shutting things down a lot more. Open-ended questions usually are the whats or the hows. So what did you think about that? It's allowing people to have to go a little bit deeper into their responses so that you can get more of a bigger picture about what's happening. So it's a little bit hard to see, but here are some examples of some open and closed-ended questions. So how do you get to work? Allows somebody to have to respond differently than if you're kind of leading the questions with a closed question, which is, do you get to work by driving, busing, or walking? That way it shuts it down and narrows down the conversation. And what we want to do when we're having communication with people is we want to allow things to open up more. So the beauty about open-ended questions also is that they help the other person kind of consider what's important about the issue that we might be discussing. Okay, and there's a couple of different types of questions that I'm going to go over here, and I'll go over the different ones and how they're helpful in each way. Next up is asking probing questions. So probing questions ask for more detail. So they are a way of allowing us to kind of go deeper into the conversation. And probing questions are meant to help to understand more about what is going on and help you understand the root of the problem. And when we can kind of get more to the root of something, it allows us to really figure out the best course of action and moving forward with things. And there are also oftentimes follow-up questions around things. After we've asked these more open-ended questions and started the dialogue, you can start asking more of these probing questions, like, could you tell me more about that? Which enhances and allows people to give a little bit more about what you might be wondering. I think these are really good questions also when talking to our kids too. A lot of the times, how's school? Fine. Maybe we could add in, could you tell me a little bit more about that? What were some of your favorite parts of the day? Just adding more questions as follow-up to guide and open up and to just go a little bit deeper into what we're trying to get at here. And probing questions are just meant to understand more about what's going on and just helping you really understand it as a listener, which is wonderful. And then requesting clarification. A lot of the times when we're communicating with people, we oftentimes make assumptions about what the other person has said. And unfortunately, assumptions oftentimes don't go well, right? Because if we've misunderstood and we run off with that, oftentimes that can lead to problems in the communication. That causes also issues with moving forward, because then we're running forward with something that isn't based off of truth and based off of really what the other person was trying to portray. So clarifying is beautiful in that it helps to eliminate or prevent any misunderstanding, confusion, or ambiguity. Clarifying questions are typically brief. I call them more of the nuts and bolts of things, right? You're just kind of really getting to it. And they're utilized to help in understanding the information being discussed. So clarifying is, is this what you said? And kind of going from there so that people can know that you really understood fully what they were trying to say, or did I summarize what you said correctly? So that you know that you've really heard what was happening. Clarifying questions just are typically brief. They're not like the open-ended ones or the probing ones. They're just more kind of cut to the chase types of questions. And they're just designed to clarify the subject that's being discussed. These types of questions often provide valuable information that allows others to ask more effective questions moving forward, so that we can continue to move the conversation. Next, paraphrasing. So paraphrasing is all about, now that you've kind of gathered all of this information, now that you've really listened and heard what the speaker has to say, what we then do is restate in our own words what we've just heard. Obviously, this isn't necessarily like parroting back exactly, because by restating it in our own words, we've really shown an understanding of the material, an understanding of what somebody's presented to us. And then after restating this and paraphrasing, we then can kind of confirm our understanding and really be on the same page with the person that we're discussing. Okay. And this goes also with that kind of miscommunication around assumptions. We don't want to make assumptions that we know. We're all different. We've all had different life experiences, different things going on. The way that we think are differently. The way that we experience life is different. So really getting paraphrasing and allowing for us to confirm our understanding really helps alleviate any types of miscommunication. Okay, and then next, being attuned to and reflecting feelings. So active listening not only requires the acknowledgement of the meaning of what is talked about, but also the underlying feelings around it. And this allows us to show that we've not only been listening to the information, but also really hearing where someone's coming from. And just this allows us to come from spaces of compassion and non-judgment. Active listening requires that we really hear someone. And if you've ever thought about times where you really felt heard, people acknowledged how you felt about things and not just what was said. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about summarizing. So summarizing allows you to concisely pull together what's been talked about. It demonstrates that you've listened and understood the speaker during your communication. This is kind of like the nice way of coming all the way around, tying things up in a nice bow about your communication. It's allowing the speaker to know that you've really heard all the kind of ins and outs. You've reflected on not only their thoughts, but also their feelings. And then you can come together in really putting all of the whole cycle together so that you acknowledge that you've really listened and heard. And by them feeling heard, it allows that level of communication to really level up. it's like another level of paraphrasing. So paraphrasing you'll do throughout, but summarizing you'll end with, just to really drive it home that you've been fully understanding. And then at that point, you can correct or fine tune maybe any little things that haven't been fully understood. So it really kind of brings it back all together nicely. And it's just useful to demonstrate the progress that has been made in your communication and your connection during the time that you've been speaking to somebody and communicating with them. So those are some of the 7 key components of active listening that are just really helpful to be mindful of and to think about when you're engaging in communication, not only in the workplace, but also in other relationships that you have in your life. And, thinking about how you can be a great active listener as a parent. A lot of these things can go a really long way in how we connect with our kids. Also, just family in general. And then definitely in the workplace, how are we effectively listening to what's going on so that we can respond appropriately and from a way of full understanding. And so besides listening, it's also important to look at how we convey how we're feeling. So when we're feeling certain ways, especially, in the workplace or even at home, we want to make sure that we're really being concise and clear about our feelings. We also don't want to come off like we're blaming. So how do we make sure that we're not, coming off, if we come off too hard in the way that we're trying to talk to people, a lot of the times what happens is people will shut down or they'll get really defensive. If you come at somebody and are like, you did this, automatically you can see the responses in somebody else of defensiveness. And then we, as the speaker, oftentimes take on the role of blaming. And that's not really helpful in healthy communication, because it's a way that will oftentimes shut people down and not allow for openness of dialogue. So one of the ways that can be helpful in, obviously we want to speak our truths. We want to make sure that we're communicating if we have feelings around something, but we want to do it in a way where we're not coming at someone or we're not blaming people. So helpful way to do that can be utilization of an I statement. And an I statement is a style of communication that focuses on the feelings or beliefs of the speaker rather than thoughts and characteristics that the speaker attributes to the listener. And by doing this, like I said, this helps with kind of alleviating some of that stuff around the blame and the defensiveness. So they're all from our perspectives, right? This is how we're feeling. So how do we express what we're feeling? And an I statement can be based off of I feel, and then because, when, and what I need is. So I'm going to give you some examples of that. And I statements focus on your experience, thoughts, feelings, reactions, and decisions, and not on any beliefs or judgments you have made and may have made about the other person. So I like this one. So here's an example. So if somebody borrows your stuff and they messed it up, right? A common response could be from anger and you ruined my jacket and are you ever going to grow up? Right? But automatically, if somebody comes at you like that, most of the time you're going to respond defensively, or it's going to lead to a shutdown of the conversation because we're going to feel scolded. So an I statement response is, I'm upset that my coat was damaged, right? So you're stating how you feel about it because the coat was damaged and I can't afford to replace it. Then there's an understanding of why we're feeling that sort of way. And I really appreciate when the things I loan out are taken care of, right? That's what we need moving forward. That's what we want moving forward. We want somebody to know that it's important that they take care of our stuff. So this way, using I statements allows you to not only express yourself, but also explain why you're feeling the way that you're feeling, and also what you want and need for the future. which can then help the listener not only understand more of where you're coming from, but also what they need to do moving forward in order to appropriately respond and engage around these certain matters. So I hope that this was helpful. And I think it's just something that we have to know that a lot of this stuff takes practice. It's not always natural. A lot of the times when we're going to be responding, we will feel our emotions coming up pretty quickly. And so how do we take that deep breath? How do we reframe and really think about how we want to communicate appropriately, what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what's going on, so that not only it helps us because then we're actually feeling understood, but then also like we're getting better results in what we want and connecting to other people. So thank you for listening.
Hi everyone, my name is Andina and I'm a counselor at SCARE. I've been working here for 9 years and I'm so grateful because I have felt so honored to work in this community, and thank you for being a part of it. And today I will be talking about cultivating a healthy relationship with anger. And this workshop will go with Heidi's about healthy communication and my other coworker, Caitlin, about conflict resolution. I'm going to try to move through it pretty smoothly and efficiently because I know I only have a certain amount of time, and I hope it's not too fast. If it is, you can always pause it and take time to reflect and then restart it. All right, let's jump in. All right, so what is anger? Anger is an emotion we feel when something gets in the way of a desired outcome and or we believe there's a violation of the way things should be. And then I have this little comic of a witch with cast on her arm and leg. And then she's at the anger management support group and she says, "My name is Hilda and I have a tendency to fly off the handle." All right, so anger activates our nervous system and it can hijack our thoughts and behaviors. I think we've all had that happen. I know I have. If we hold on to it and or express chronic anger, it can cause mental and physical health problems. This is really an issue, y'all. It can wreak havoc on your organs, on your heart. So if you're somebody that carries a lot of anger around and expresses it a lot or bottles it up, please go to therapy, get spiritual guidance, get some sort of support to work through it and let go of some of it. Anger often masks other emotions that are more difficult to identify and express. This is super important, y'all. Very often, anger acts as a protective shield for more sensitive and vulnerable emotions underneath, like shame, fear, sadness, grief, embarrassment, guilt. There's a lot of possibilities. So when you're feeling angry, try to ask yourself what feeling is underneath the anger. Self-awareness is crucial. When you were growing up, what was your experience of your caregiver's relationship to anger? How did that impact you? This is an important thing to reflect on. You may even pause the video and write or give yourself a chance to really sit there and think and reflect about it. Because our caregivers, the way that they handled anger affects us, and very often the way that we handle anger now as adults. And that goes into the next question. What is your current relationship to anger? And I'm going to give you some examples. Some of us bottle it up and then explode. Some of us bottle it up and struggle with depression and anxiety. And that's not fun. That's really can be a tough place to be. And on the little image I picked, it says, we can only bottle up our feelings for so long before they overflow. And this is very true about a lot of difficult feelings. Some of us behave passive aggressively and make sarcastic and hurtful comments. And that's how we handle anger instead of expressing it directly. some of us behave in reactive, aggressive ways that cause problems. And I have this little comic here of a therapist and a client, and the client grabbing the therapist's tie and threatening him. And then it says, the therapist is saying, and when did this over-aggressive behavior begin to manifest itself? All right, so it's important to understand that there is a part of our nervous system that goes into survival mode: fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Many of us have heard of fight or flight. Some of us have heard of freeze. Fawn is kind of newly catching on as being understood as one of our survival instincts. So if we fight, when we perceive a threat, we want to attack it in some way. Flight, we want to escape it. Freeze, we want to avoid provoking it. And fawn, we want to placate it. So one example of this is, I think of in our society, very often men are fairly assertive and sometimes aggressive in the way that they pursue women romantically. And very often women will try to de-escalate the situation by acting really nice. Like, oh, hi, yeah, here's my phone number, whatever. Just trying to de-escalate because we feel uncomfortable with how dominant and assertive the man is being, or sometimes even aggressive, like I said. So remember those survival instincts, because when we have a pattern of being very reactive with anger, very often that means we go into fight mode a lot, and that's a survival mechanism. So often these automatic reactions help us survive. So for example, if you're at work and somebody comes in and pulls a gun out and you go into fight mode, you might go and try to wrestle the gun away or throw something at the person with the gun. That's risky, but you may do that. You may throw yourself on the ground and freeze. You may run out of the room, depending on the situation. You may fawn. You may say, hey, what can we get for you? What do you need, to try to de-escalate the person? So sometimes they help us survive. Sometimes they actually create problems. So for example, if your supervisor asks you to do something, like if they say, hey, can you please do inventory? And then you get annoyed that they ask you that for whatever reason. And then you say, I'm not doing inventory, you do it yourself. Obviously, that's not going to go over well with your supervisor. So that can create a problem. So we can experience fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Sometimes we have patterns of a certain one that we go to a lot. So for people that struggle with anger and aggressiveness and a pattern of that, they probably go into fight mode a lot. So what do we do about it? How do we de-escalate ourselves from being so reactive and aggressive and angry? So we have to really get in touch with our bodies and notice when anger is starting, and notice the sensations in our bodies. So when you notice yourself starting to feel upset, you may clench your jaws, you may get a churning feeling in your stomach, you may have an increase in rapid heart rate, feeling hot. There's a lot of possibilities. And here we have this really cool image. Some psychologists mapped out where emotions manifest in the body. And this is where anger manifests, in the upper body, the arms, and the head. In order to respond instead of react, we need to calm ourselves down so that we can bring ourselves to our prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that helps us solve problems and act with kindness and empathy, okay? So in order to go from fight or flight mode when we're getting really angry to calming down, we need to have a strategy. Different things work for different people. There's infinite possibilities of ways that we can bring ourselves into the present, ground ourselves, and calm down. Very often, if you need to do this in the middle of a conflict or conversation, you can tell the person, excuse me, I need a moment. I will come back to this conversation when I'm ready. And you can even tell them in 20 minutes, in an hour, whatever. And so here are some options for calming down that I put on here. Deep breathing, chewing gum, smelling something calming, listening to music. There's a lot of possibilities, and you can Google them and try different ones and see what works for you. And then once you're calmer, that's when you go back into your good judgment and good decision-making part of your mind so that you can move forward in the situation in a healthy way. Another important thing as you're working through having an anger reaction to a conflict at work or to whatever, what questions can you ask yourself to really cultivate that self-awareness and understand what you need? Again, y'all, I'm kind of trying to go quickly because I have a time constraint, but you can pause this and sit there and journal about these questions, or even just sit there and reflect and think about them. So think of the last time you were angry, you could do it that way to get more self-awareness. I'm going to use an example from a workplace. What was the triggering event? Okay, so let's say I'm at work and my supervisor rushes in the room and seems impatient and yells at me, "Hey, get this place cleaned up," and then walks out of the room. I start to notice my face getting hot, my fist clenching. I notice I'm getting angry that just happened. And so then I'm like, uh-oh, wait a minute. I don't want to go off on my boss. That's not a good idea. That will create a problem. So I know I'm getting angry. I need to calm down so that I can figure out how to move forward. So I might go on a little walk, take deep breaths, and then I would ask myself, what story did I tell myself about the triggering event? So I might identify that when my boss did that, I thought to myself, my boss doesn't have any respect for me. My boss is probably going to continue treating me this way. I'm probably going to end up quitting. A lot of times we go into a black and white extreme thinking mode when we get stressed and angry. So try to be aware if you're doing that and what story you're telling yourself. And then ask yourself, is this true? Because once I'm calm, I'm more able to see the situation from different perspectives, and I might be able to identify, wait a minute, my boss doesn't always act like that. Maybe she's having a really bad day and didn't realize how that comment impacted me. So then I can try to have compassion for where she was coming from. Does the triggering event remind me of other situations or people in my life? I might think to myself, oh man, my mom treats me like that sometimes and yells at me and orders me around, and it really makes me angry when she does that. So identifying that can help, because sometimes when we react to one triggering event, a lot of the feelings, the intense feelings we're having have to do with other historical events in our lives. Another question we can ask, did I play a role in creating the conflict? What was it? And with that situation I just described, I might think to myself, oh man, I was supposed to clean this place up last night before I got off my shift and I didn't do it. And so then probably my boss came in and got frustrated that I hadn't taken care of my responsibilities last night. And that's why my boss probably felt extra frustrated today about this place not being clean. So I actually played a role in why and how this situation happened. And then we have this little funny comic here. A lot of people blame others, but a lot of people have a hard time taking accountability for our own behavior. Here's some more questions we can ask. What feelings are underneath the anger? So in my example I gave, I might think to myself, I felt disrespected, disappointed in the way my boss treated me, and hurt. And once I can identify those help tell me more about what I need. So then I might say to myself, oh, I need to reestablish a feeling of feeling respected. And how do I do that? So then I might ask, do I need support? Okay, I could go to a friend, vent, talk, ask their guidance about the situation, what they think. A trusted friend, a counselor, whoever I trust, their opinion. And then I ask myself, how can I get my needs met without hurting others? So in my example I just gave, I might decide with the friend's advice to go to my supervisor once she's calm and once I'm calm. And I might say to her, hey, when you, yelled for me to clean the place up, I felt disrespected. And I'm just hoping in the future, if you want me to clean up, can you please just ask, just make a request, and I'll do my best. So, and again, every situation is different, y'all. So, you're going to come up with different answers to these questions. I'm just giving one example. This process can be difficult and it takes practice, okay? If we're not used to this self-awareness and this identifying our emotions and our needs and how to move forward. It can feel awkward at first because we're not used to it. The good news is that every time we practice it, our brains are literally rewiring themselves so that it will come more and more naturally to us. And that's the good news about anything that you practice. Our brains are amazing at rewiring themselves to get better and better at things. And now, in a situation where someone's being abusive, there's a pattern of egregious abuse and crossing boundaries and or bullying. You may not be able to address it with that person. You may need to go to their supervisor, HR, whoever the appropriate person is at work. There may be some situations that do not have clear solutions, and that's tough. Sometimes when we have a supervisor that is crossing our boundaries and we don't think they would be good at taking feedback, and we need this job and we don't have another option of quitting this job and going somewhere else, that can leave us feeling stuck in a cycle with our boundaries being crossed. And so I'm not acting like, oh, I have the magic solution to everything. There are some tough situations. If you're in a situation like that, try your best to get support and think things through and see if there's anything under your control that you can do to make the situation better. That's where counseling and, spiritual guidance and things like that can be really helpful. Trusted friends, family. Taking care of ourselves. This is so important. We can be better about having a healthy relationship with anger and with our emotions if we are taking good care of ourselves. So healthy diet, getting enough exercise, getting enough sleep, limiting alcohol and drugs, taking meds, visiting the doctor and the dentist, practicing calming skills. You can practice these calming skills every day. That way, when you really need them, when you're angry or stressed, it's already coming more natural to you because your brain is already rewiring to have that be your go-to, to know how to calm down when you really need to. Community care is super important too. Trying to cultivate healthy relationships skills, accepting care and support, offering care and support to others, seeking out counseling and spiritual support, again, trusted community members. And there we go. Thank you so much for coming to these workshops. I hope they were helpful. If you have any particular questions, you're welcome to contact the counseling department at SCARE. If you would like to start counseling, please contact us. And I really hope that these were helpful coping skills that you can carry into your life. And I also hope you have a really beautiful day. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, my name is Michelle O'Quinn. I'm the job developer for SCARE. Today I will be speaking with you on communication in the workplace. So our agenda today is to define communication, the types of communication, informal communication, and body language. The communication skills are the ability you use when giving and receiving different kinds of information. Some examples include communicating new ideas, feelings, or even an update on your project. Communication skills can involve listening, speaking, observing, and empathizing. It is also helpful to understand the difference in how to communicate through face-to-face communications, phone conversation, and digital communication, like an email or social media. In verbal communication, use a strong and confident speaking voice, use active listening, avoid filter words, and avoid industry jargon when appropriate. In nonverbal communication, Notice how your emotions feel physically. So sometimes when we don't want to engage in conversation, but we're kind of pushing ourselves to do it, you might do something like this. When you have teenagers, you notice it more. But the looking up at the sky, the waiting for somebody to finish talking because you feel that you have something else to do. So your nonverbal communications and written communication, you want to strive for simplicity. I was always told that you communicate with the least amount of words as possible. Don't rely on tone in your written communication. Take time to review your written communication and keep a file of your writing that you find effective. Where's he has a strong and confident speaking voice. Speak slowly because speaking too quickly makes you appear to be nervous. And also you appear to look nervous and then people stop listening. They kind of tune you out because you're speaking so quickly, and most of the time they don't take you seriously. Avoid filler words. A filler word is an apparently meaningless word or phrase or sound that marks a pause or hesitation in your speech. So common filler words in English are like, okay, right, and once you're, see, I just did it. Once you're conscious of these words, it takes a minute for you to learn how to not do that and to go ahead and take that pause. So because we're so rushed to continue the flow of a conversation, we'll use a filler word like like, okay, right, or just to like fill in. See, I just did it again, just to fill in the space, like the empty space, because we're trying to maybe search for a more appropriate word so that the conversation or what we're saying flows smoothly. But unconsciously, we don't realize that those filler words actually create a speed bump in our conversation anyway, so it's really not doing us any good. But just try to avoid those common filler words. Stand straight, and your body language is just as important as the words that you're speaking. Informal conversation in the workplace. So as we build relationships in the workplace, we tend to have these informal conversations, which are awesome because they help us build relationships even outside of the workplace. So someone that you get along with great at work, you may also invite them to share opportunities or experiences outside of work and build friendships. That's fine. But we have to be very careful when we're having informal conversations, especially if we come from the same workplace. You want to make sure that you're not talking about the workplace in a negative way or people at the workplace in a negative way, because those feelings and they can trickle over into your your professional workplace and professional relationships. So we want to go through the think method and look into whether or not the information that you guys are sharing is true, or is it coming from a second party or a third party, or it's just something that you're thinking could be the case. We want to make sure that when we're sharing information, especially if it's about the workplace or people in the workplace, that it's true, that it's firsthand, and then we want to make sure that it's helpful. And I'm just talking about informal conversations that you may have about people that you work with or about the company that you work for. So you want to make sure that if you're talking about those things, that it's helpful, that it's inspiring, that you're inspiring each other in good and inspiring each other in a good way, to speak of what's necessary. So what's necessary about the workplace that you're talking about, what is necessary about a coworker that you're talking about. Maybe that coworker needs help, or maybe you're having an issue with a coworker, but you need to speak to that person, or you need to speak to management, not really spreading it around the workplace. And is it kind? So are you speaking kindly of your coworkers? Are you speaking kindly of your place of work? And so we want to use the think method before we speak about our job or the people in the workplace. And just run it through those filters. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And ultimately, is it kind? Because the words that we speak, it's a medicine, and it can be a good medicine and it can be a bad medicine. So it's just like, are the words that you're saying, are they kind? Are they necessary? Is it necessary for you to speak about that? And also we have to keep in mind too that when we're talking about our coworkers and our place of employment, that we are speaking to a perception, and we have the ability and the capability to change someone's perception of a certain person, or change someone's perception of a company, and we can change their perception for good, and we can try to change their perception for something that's not good. So just always speak kind and true, even in informal conversations, and especially if it has to do with the workplace. Woo, there's nowhere to move me. Telephone communication. Try to move over here. Yeah, out the way. Telephone communication. Telephone communication lacks nonverbal cues. And when we're having a phone conversation, we don't have the facial expressions or the body language to help us decode the message. So we must focus on every word that's being said and the tone of voice that's being used. And we compensate for the absence of nonverbal cues by adding more weight to the words that people choose when they're conversating with us and the tone of voice that's being used. And nowadays, before it wasn't so common, but now it is, and we bust out our handy dandy phones, and when we need an answer straight away, we might engage in texting a coworker. And when we text each other, it's, again, there are nonverbal cues that aren't there. We only have the words that are sent in the text message, and hoping that we conveyed our message and that the other person received it. Because the whole point of communication is making sure that the other person got the message that you're trying to convey. And we're missing the tone of voice in a text message. We're missing the facial expressions. We're missing the body language, unless you add emojis. We're missing their presence to help us decode the message. So to complicate matters even worse, when text messaging, we use shorthand like LOL for laugh out loud. And then also sometimes when we're typing, we misspell things, or we try to write things really short so that there's not this big, long paragraph of a text message when it should be a conversation. But there's a lot that can be missed in a text message. Employers look for written communication, and so written communication can be memos, employee manuals, faxes, text messages, letters, and emails. When I started off at the bottom in my other job, I never thought that years later I would be in charge of writing the employee manual. That was pretty gnarly. So you never know what tasks your employer or your boss is going to put on you. So it could be that you're asked to write a memo or send a fax or send an email to a coworker on their behalf. With emails, an email is equivalent to texting with an added disadvantage. In an email communication, there is a delay between the message being sent, the message being received, and the message being replied to. This prevents a solid thread in the conversation from forming. So when someone sends you an email, they're in a frame of mind that they may not be in later. And when you read and reply to their email, so they could send you an email, they're in one frame of mind, you haven't even read the email yet, then by the time you decide to read the email and reply, they're over here in this frame of mind. It says, so your reply is now floating in a different time, and it may link to the original message, or it might not, it may be irrelevant now. Like that was so 8 o'clock in the morning, you know what I'm saying? It's 1 o'clock now. The same applies to your reply. There may be a delay between the time you sent it and the time the other person reads it. So you may send and by the time they read it, your email is irrelevant. So that's the hinky part of, emails. I always follow my emails up with the phone call, or vice versa. I call first and then follow up with an email. Nonverbal communication. Perfect. So the one to the far left looks like she's just ready to go home. She did not want to get out of the bed in the first place. Maybe she didn't get her Starbucks. I don't know. She just does not look happy. And then the one to the far right, she looks like she's ready to work for me. So your nonverbal communication: maintain eye contact, practice your posture, practice good posture, smile, avoid unnecessary movement, and keep an open stance. So they say, like, when you stand and you're open and you're kind of straddled, that it makes you appear to be open. But then when you cross your arms, like number 6, where it says avoid crossing your arms, it makes you appear that you're shut down, that you're not open. You don't want to hear anything anybody has to say. You just want to go on about your day. Not that I'm lying anyway, but anyways, so try not to cross your arms, and then nod to show interest. So to review, we defined communication, the different types of communication, informal communication, and your body language. Thank you for joining me, And again, my name is Michelle O'Quinn. Should you have any questions, you can reach me at michelle@scareinc.org. Have a wonderful day.
Hi, my name is Tech Associate and I'm the Adult Program Coordinator here at SCARE. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about social media communication, otherwise known as digital footprints. I've created a PowerPoint that I'm going to kind of go through and a couple little fun videos to watch that kind of gives you a little bit more in-depth information about what digital footprints are, how they are helpful and harmful, and what employers look for through the social media or digital footprint aspect. So digital footprints, when you think of that, you don't really understand what it might mean. It's a digital footprint. So what does a footprint do? A footprint leaves behind traces of yourself. Just imagine if you were walking on the beach barefoot and you turned around and looked, you can see your trail of footprints behind you. That's kind of the same thing with the digital world. Technology can be used as a digital footprint that can kind of hold anything you post online. It doesn't mean that it ever really goes away. So is this helpful or harmful towards your possible employment opportunities? Is it helpful or harmful in your communication with others? Relationships, going to colleges or looking at being accepted into colleges. So kind of gives you a little roundabout of what it is and what to expect and how you can kind of change your own digital footprint to benefit you long term. So what is a digital footprint? So whenever you're using the internet, you leave behind a trail of information, and that's known as your digital footprint. Like I had explained or had the little scenario of walking on the beach, you turn around, you see your footprints behind you. It's the same thing when you're on the internet and using different type of sites for your specific information. So some of these examples are using social media on your computer or devices. So using your at-home computer, a library computer, a learning lab computer, a laptop, a work computer or device, your cell phone, iPads, any type of tablets. Anything that you're using, you can leave a digital footprint behind. Also logging into other websites using your social media credentials. Now, a little explanation of this is when you are going onto a website and you're creating a username account, sometimes it'll ask you to use your Facebook account information, your Google password information, things like that. That is trailing your information from one site to another. Sharing information, data, and photos with your connections. So the things that you share online, if you post pictures, if you share anything, all that stuff still leaves that trail behind you of what your footprint is. Even if you join different apps like dating sites or tracking your health and fitness, any of those can leave a digital footprint. Also, this is creating online accounts for employment sites. This could be a LinkedIn account. This could be Indeed. It could be EdJoin. Any of those websites that usually have a list of different jobs and you enter in all your information, that is a different form of a digital footprint. So why does it matter? Why do they matter? So if you think about it, whatever you post online, they're relatively permanent. So once it's online, you really have little to control of how others will use it. And this kind of a good example is is if you're on Facebook, you get notifications for memories that happened years ago. And, sometimes memories from years ago can be good, could be bad. It could also be someone sharing a picture of you or screenshotting what you had posted and shared it on a different site. And you thought that it was private on your information on your own wall, and others have access to that because of how technology is today. So another reason why it matters is it can determine a person's digital reputation, and that's just as important as your offline. So what you post online is a representation of yourself. So how you reflect outside of the digital world, a lot of times, you may be viewed the same online or offline, but if you're trying to keep a specific reputation offline, it's always best to have that same reputation online. So being professional or being a certain kind of way as to what you post or how you act or how people will see you. Employers also can check your social media before they decide to hire you. And this could be helpful or harmful because depending on what you post online, they can use that to make their decision. If they see, things that don't really fall in line with the company's mission statement or how they feel like they should be represented online, offline with any of their employers, this could be, really detrimental to you receiving an employment opportunity with that employer. So, you always have to make sure that, kind of thinking about what it is that you're posting. Also, if you're looking to get into a college or a university, those in admissions, they may check your online digital footprint to see if you would be a good fit at their school before they determine or accept you. And, that could be helpful or harmful as well. And also, words and photos could be misinterpreted and altered by others. So kind of like I said before, that once you put online, you don't know what other people are doing with it. I know many of you have probably seen memes floating around with different words on them, and it's usually a picture of someone that you may not know, but it's a funny picture and it has some type of, quote that kind of goes with what the picture could mean. They even made a game out of memes where you see the picture and you can decide what the quote could be. And depending on what it is, if they take one of your photos, they could use that for that because it was posted online and there's really nothing you can do in regards to, trying to keep your things private, because nothing is 100% private online. Once you post it online, it's kind of stuck there forever. Also, one other thing with your digital footprint is identity theft. You never know what someone can take from your information you post online. They have, reality shows based around, identity theft and people stealing others' photos and names and information that was posted online and using it to kind of create their own world based around you. And it's a complete opposite person of who you are, and that could be harmful to your reputation depending on how they are using your name. So, there's some things to kind of think about as to what's important and what's not important, and how you can kind of pick and choose and see, what it is you should talk about, and how you can kind of go about your social media presence. So some tips that you can do to protect yourself. Even though anything you post online is not completely private. It is always best practice to keep your accounts private. Make it hard for anyone to search you and find you. So that could be, removing your email address for others to see, removing your phone number, making it hard that you are unsearchable unless they know a specific thing about you, like your email address. So that kind of cues those who are, really close to you that they can have access to finding your social media, and then those who do not know you to find it. Also, with private accounts, it's always best practice to not use your email address that you use for business and connect it to your personal life. So if you have an email address that you use for your resumes or that you post, you send business emails to, it's always best not to use that same email address to make your accounts on social media or in the digital world, unless it pertains to business. So employable websites, that you can use the same email address that you use for your resume, but you wouldn't use that same email address for your Facebook or your, let's say if you had a Snapchat or an Instagram account, those should be a private email address. Also, some things that you can do is limit what you share. So when you limit what you share, you should think about what it is that you are sharing. Is it too much information? Is this information could be leaked? If you put your phone number on there and someone that you don't know can see it, they might have your phone number and now you're getting bombarded with spam calls. Or if you're posting your location all the time, that could lead to people you don't know finding where you are, or people that you do know that you don't necessarily want them to bother you can find out where you are. So that kind of goes along with like limiting what you post. Deciding what you post online can be helpful or harmful. So if you're posting things like, family togetherness, family, being with your family and, doing things, being out in the world and just having a very personable, postings opposed to maybe videos or posts of you being out and maybe doing something that probably some employers might look at as being like, oh, I don't know if I really want to hire this person because of what they kind of posted. It seemed like maybe they party too much. And I want to make sure that the person that I hire is, on time, but I want to make sure that they're on time. Also, limiting what you post can also go along with, if you are with an employer, what you're posting could hurt you. So if you are working for an employer and you call in sick one day, but on your social media, it shows that you were out the night before and had a really late night. And that could look at that you called out work for not being responsible, opposed to being sick, or if you're a no-show, but you posted that you were out of town, things like that can really detriment your position at where you're at. Also being mindful of who you add onto your social media. When you are working with, your coworkers, being mindful of who you add on social media, because even if they are your friend at work, they might not be your friend in your personal life. And if there's something that you do online that they aren't very happy with what you did, they might use that against you to your employer, and that could possibly cause some interruptions in your employment there. You could get fired. So, you just have to be very mindful of who you add on there. Make sure that it is people that you trust, people that are close to you, and people that you have, a good relationship with. And always just remember to represent yourself professionally. So you know, you want to try to keep a strong digital footprint as well as a strong representation of yourself professionally outside of technology. And also one major thing is delete old accounts. If there is old accounts of yours from years ago that you do not use, that has stuff about you, it's always best just to delete what you don't use. Not saying that there could be possible things that are still online that you don't know about, but it's also just good practice just to delete things that you don't use. Something else that's not on here is, you know, you can always go online and Google your name and see what pops up. And that'll kind of give you an idea of how you're being represented in your digital footprint. It might pull up pictures of yourself. It might pull up, you know, pictures that you were tagged in on different social media platforms. It might be links to your accounts to see if you are searchable. So keep that in mind. That's something that you can do to see what's out there in the world about you. Now here's a video, a TED Talk by Nicola Osborne, and it is in regards to digital footprints. I'm going to share a different screen and play this video for you. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and play this.
What do your digital footprints say about you? What do I mean by digital footprint? I mean all the stuff that we leave online, the digital tracks and traces, the stuff that makes up other people's perception of who we are, as well as our own. Some of those things are really visible, and some of them are really invisible. Some of them are the things that you've watched, the trail of things you've watched on YouTube, and then something else. Some of the things like your search history, but also the things that really bother are the stuff that are entirely within our control and are about our own creative process. So I want you to start off by thinking about what the last thing that you shared online was. Now this might have been 2 or 3 minutes ago, this might have been hours ago, this might have been days ago. What was that last thing that you shared? It might be something on Facebook, it might be something on Snapchat. I know that I just presented tweet automatically because I like to be a little bit smart when I'm speaking. But what was that last thing? What does that say about you? If someone was looking at that, what does that tell you? Does that tell you what you are? Does it tell you about your interests? Maybe it says something that's really positive or quirky. So again, I'm being a bit smart because you're baking it. Maybe it shows that you've got interest. Maybe it shows that you do a particular kind of job. Maybe it shows a particular kind of hobby you have. Maybe that's something you really want to show to the world, something really positive. So if someone looks at that and thinks, brilliant, I recognise that person as myself. And I think that's what I would like to portray to people. And maybe portraying different parts of yourself with different kinds of audiences. So as we often write about having different kinds of identities with different kind of contexts. So presenting yourself in sort of on-stage ways, not stage ways, just being on stage, just come on stage, because it's very relevant. But sometimes you have to have different kinds of identities, and they don't always stay totally separate. And in fact, some of the things shown online, maybe they're not presenting exactly how you want to do it. So this is my polite version of sharing something slightly inappropriate online. This is my cat dog. This is on Twitter and Instagram. Please don't judge. or judge me, that's all. You might be sharing stuff you don't really intend to get a wider airing. Now, God forbid not too embarrassed, although I have said in class with consent to use again, which I really should have. But maybe something gets out of hand, maybe something goes forward that you don't expect it to get to. And then your identity starts to be this slight model of things that represent the different kinds of audiences. You get this idea of context clubs, where your friends and your colleagues and people who you run with, people who you create crafts with, maybe they all converge in the same space. They all start to see different parts of your identity. And that's quite challenging. And when you're sharing social media, that's really likely to happen. Your parents might be on Facebook. People who you don't know might turn out to people who you do know when you're sharing stuff in anonymous places. You have to be thinking about what that identity is projecting about you and what you want it to project about you. And it's not just about what you share and where you share it, it's also who you share it with. You can choose, but most of us don't choose to. So we've been doing some research with students at the University of Edinburgh, and we've been asking them to tell us how they use social media, how they think about their identity online. And 61% of them very, very rarely check their privacy settings. And 5% of them have found something online that they did not want to see. They thought it had been taken away, they didn't think they posted it. So privacy settings and who you share with and the circles that you share with matter. You share to these networks, they share further on. You have control of that, but most of us choose not to exercise them. And that's kind of interesting. So we have these footprints, we have these things that are visible, we have these things that are invisible. We also create other people's footprints for them, but we don't always think about it that way. So we have in all of these social media platforms the ability to tag people. And that's great, that's lovely, you can say you're all in the same place. And it's really good until you turn down this one invitation to do something quite important and someone tags you in an event somewhere else. That's not so great. If someone tags you in a photo and it's not a good photo. Now, sometimes that has a really serious consequence. So a lot of training teachers, particularly in the US, have found that pictures of them drinking, not drinking underage, just drinking when they're sort of in the 20s, have been enough to impact on their employment potential, because that's an image that their employers don't want to have of them. Sometimes it's much less important. That sometimes it's like, you haven't got me at the right side, I don't like that picture is not correct lettering. That matters too though, you have to respect people's wishes, and we're still trying to figure out this etiquette about what we tag, what we share, how our digital footprints are constructed, and how we are constructing the other people every day. So again, when we did research on our students, 11% of people said they had been tagged in an unwanted way in a photograph. 11%, that's a huge number. And again, thinking about the seriousness potentially, there are some professional bodies and things that from the moment that you start university, sometimes from before that, your presence online actually is part of your professional identity. Student nurses are asked on the day they start university to consider themselves a professional. That is how they first present themselves online. That's a really big ask, I have to say. So the stuff that you're sharing now, the stuff that you share every day, can have long-term consequences. The thing is though, I'm sounding a bit scary. I love social media. I am on all of the social media. If you Google me, you will find me all over the place. I totally love these things. They are creative, fantastic tools. They are like a big, giant yarn shop for Iron City. And it's a huge suite of things that to be creative and wonderful and create marvelous things. I am not going to dissuade you from looking stuff up. There can be really good things about being present online. Again, with our students in the research, 16% of them had approaches for jobs, for volunteering opportunities, because of having presence online. I've had professional opportunities because I share cooking pictures. It can be really fantastic to build up your network. It's a really positive thing, as long as you're being deliberative and think about what you're doing. Because once something is out there, it's really hard to get it back. These things, they go to hands, they grow, they network. You end up with this big tangle of things. If you want to take back a post, you might send it to one place, it might be copied to somewhere else. If you want to get something removed, you might have to ask your friends to kind of forget it was ever there, and to remove a screenshot of it as well. It's not that easy to take stuff back once it's out there. It's not impossible. The stuff that I posted when I was a teenager online, just about young enough to have posted stuff online as a teenager, that has disappeared, and some of that I'm police have asked me that I really miss. But you have to assume stuff will stick around a little bit. And trying to put it back is difficult. I want you to think 10 years ahead. It's 2026. I have no idea what state the world is in, especially over the last few weeks. Think ahead, it's 2026. What does the digital footprint of stuff that you are leaving now say about you? Is it saying the right things? Is that history of you? Because we will all have a history of us recorded in lots of different places. What does that say about you? Is it what you want it to be? And when you post something next time, I want you to think about that. I want you to think, this thing that I'm sharing, this post, this comment, it might be silly, it doesn't have to be serious. I have 90% of what social media is being fun and might be this one. But I want you to think about, what are you creating? Are you creating something beautiful and complex, like this Belgian Huli glass sculpture? Maybe you can't see everything, maybe different audience and different things, but interesting and complex and a brilliant presentation for you. That's what I want you to think about when you think about making a digital footprint for the future. And I want you to think about that when you're thinking about how you deal with stuff that you don't want to stay online forever. Just to be thinking about a long-term view of it. It might be ephemeral, it might be around forever, but always be thinking, how do I make a digital footprint say the right thing about me
So kind of like what she said, let's go back a little bit. Let's see if I can pull it up. You know, you think back years ahead, or you think forward years ahead. You know, what do you see, what you're posting online today? How do you think that'll affect you in your years ahead? Do you think that it could have a positive presence on who you are or a negative presence of who you are? You know, so being mindful of what you post online, and kind of like what Nicola had said is that, you know, some things may disappear, some things may not. It just kind of depends on how you take advantage of your online presence and your privacy settings and how you set things. You have total control of that, of what people see, how they can see it. It doesn't mean that the people that are able to view it will use that same privacy or respect towards you. So that's where you have to be mindful of what you share online. It can really, you know, change the attitude of some, or, you know, it could also change the attitude of yourself, of how it might get out there if it's something that you did or didn't want to be shared in outside stories. As she had said about, you know, others tagging you in photos, and it might be something that you don't want to be tagged in, or you had turned something down, or like I had said earlier, you didn't go to work a day, but there's a video or a tagged photo of you somewhere else doing something either that day that you were supposed to be somewhere or the night before. So, you know, just again, being mindful of what you post. This could really affect, you know, your communication and your professionalism online. So here is another video about strong digital footprints that I wanted to share with you. So let me go ahead and get that going.
Young professionals, seasoned professionals, listen up. As social media becomes more ingrained in society, employers are using it to evaluate potential candidates for jobs.
Nine on Your Side's Max Darrow explains how your digital footprint can set you apart from other candidates in good ways and bad. Should I post this to Facebook? Should I retweet this? Snapchat it? Well, if you're asking yourself the question, the answer is probably no. Will your next boss see the post in question? Maybe, maybe not. But
so let's go ahead and share one other video with you about the strong digital footprints.
Young professionals, seasoned professionals, listen up. As social media becomes more ingrained in society, employers are using it to evaluate potential candidates for jobs.
Nine on Your Side's Max Darrow explains how your digital footprint can set you apart from other candidates in good ways and bad. Should I post this to Facebook? Should I retweet this? Snapchat it? Well, if you're asking yourself the question, the answer is probably no. Will your next boss see the post in question? Maybe, maybe not. But there's a good chance they will.
Pretty much every recruiter is going to search people's names on the internet to see what they find before they invite someone for an interview or before they make a hiring decision.
Susan Kalita works in the Career Services Department at the University of Arizona. She says in this day and age, having a strong social media presence is crucial when it comes to finding a job.
More and more, the lines are blurred between people's personal and professional lives. And so you need to make sure that on your personal social media, you're still presenting yourself professionally.
In her eyes, it's a part of the interview process. It's a way for employers to get to know you before they really get to know you.
To have a consistent brand professionally that shows you like the kind of professional that you want to be in your career, that's consistent across online, on paper, and in person. You're presenting yourself on social media as well as LinkedIn and your resume.
Marion Arthur just graduated from the University of Arizona. She's not going into a tech field, but nevertheless, she's focused on having a strong digital footprint.
It's about the likes, it's about the sharing, and you're sharing yourself and you're presenting yourself in the way that you want to on social media.
For years, she says people were always told what not to post on social media, yet she still sees people in her network post completely unprofessional things.
Out of the number of posts out of my friends, I'd say 50-50. They don't think of that as something that future employers are going to look at. And they might not even be, especially if they're a freshman, they might not even be thinking about future employers yet.
Though more young professionals will be more active on social media like Snapchat, Facebook, and Twitter, Kalita and Arthur advise professionals of all ages to be on LinkedIn and to make posts to other sites that are relevant to their careers as well.
So many companies are asking for your LinkedIn, and you don't want to be cut out of the loop just because of your age. The farther you are in your career, it's probably even more important to have positive professional things online about you.
A study conducted by the Society for Human Resource Management backs them up and offers advice on ways job seekers can improve their digital footprint. Have complete professional profiles, keep public content professional, join social media groups relevant to careers, post about relevant accomplishments and skills, frequently update professional profiles, and have connections and followers relevant to the career. Kalita says having a strong digital footprint can distinguish you as a strong candidate for a job.
Don't be afraid of putting things online. Think about your goals in your career and start putting stuff out there that reflects you as that kind of professional.
A way she says to get started, Google yourself, see what comes up, and ask yourself, is this presenting me as the type of professional I would like to be? If not, it may be time to change up the strategy. Max Darrow, KGUN 9 on your side.
So the next time I ask to Snapchat with you, just go along with it.
Okay, I will.
Like you.
And your boss will be really impressed if, like Max, your picture can talk.
Yeah, that is true, right, Erin?
Yeah, that was pretty impressive, I have to admit.
So kind of based on that clip or that short video is when you are, deciding to post things online, you have to
Eat only raw.
Nothing but plant-based.
So when you sit there and think about that, that news clip about your strong digital footprints, is you shouldn't be afraid of having a digital representation of yourself, but it also, you also need to think about how that digital representation really is representing you. Is it representing you in a positive light or a negative light? And usually you want to try to steer away from that negativity and find that positive light for yourself. Because if you think about, what you post online, is this something that's going to affect your employability? Could you lose your employment? And then you think about it, how does this affect me? How does this affect my family? How does it, affect your relationships with people and, your relationships in your professional and personal life? So what your employers are looking for, or what, potential employers are looking for, is how you represent yourself online. Kind of what I've talked about, that professionalism, keeping it online, offline, and be true to who you are. A lot of employers look at how you represent yourself, because if you've gone in for an interview or you haven't yet, sometimes we're nervous. Sometimes we might act a certain way to be, really super professional, and have a communication style, and it might just be a little too strict for them, and they might want to see more of a natural flow, a natural representation of yourself. So sometimes when they're looking on social media platforms, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for if the person who they interviewed is a real person? Is this person that's sitting in front of me that I'm asking these questions to see if they'll work for me is who they are in their real life? You know, they like to snoop before they interview you. So they want to kind of get to know who you are before they sit down with you and see if you're a good fit for their company, you know, and make sure that you are going to benefit for yourself as well as benefit for them. Like I said, your personality, how you represent yourself online, how you represent yourself on these resume platforms, like I've mentioned before, Indeed, LinkedIn, and building up those platforms as well are really, really beneficial for your digital footprint, because you can update them, you can add to them, you can change everything. And a lot of recruiters are looking at those websites for certain things, and all they have to do is search, and your digital footprint might pop up as a possible candidate. Also, like I previously mentioned about your email address, is keeping them separate, but also using something that's professional as to your first name and your last name as your email address that you're using for your business. Not something like for example, I love coffee at yahoo.com. That's not a great or a professional representation of yourself if you use your name, tech associate at yahoo.com, or you know, things like that, or your first initial last name, or your first name last initial, something like that, that kind of just keeps it very professional to where they know who it is that they're looking at when they're talking to you, like, oh, this name matches with their email address. They are pretty, you know, professional in that form. So let's continue our digital footprint search. You know, just keep those things in mind. I know that there's many different types of communication styles. Digital footprints is just one of them. It's a social media communication style. And, you know, I hope that this information kind of gives you an idea of that technology, digital aspect of communication.